Good morning. Welcome to the April meeting of the Metro North Long Island Committee. We're going to start the agenda. Public comments. I have one speaker, Mr. Murray Bowden. Mr. Bowden.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm not supposed to be here this morning. I'm supposed to be in Switzerland hiking. 2 weeks ago, I went into the doctor to have a little splinter taken out of my shin. He said it's biopsy came back positive. Prep him. We're taking it out. It was a hole about that big, and my leg is open so that they know that if they manhandle me and open up the wound, it's not good for me. My life got turned upside down in 15 seconds. It will never be the same again. This place has to turn upside down too. I'm going to use first names because it's symbolic of the necessity of a change. It's also necessary for when we ask in a committee meeting a question that it gets answered. It may not be appropriate at the board meeting, but here it is. They do it at New Jersey Transit quite effectively. Jim Simpson changed the rules, and he changes it on the fly. If more than the required 5 minutes is necessary, it goes on. And if there's a question asked of a board member or an operating person, it gets answered right then and there. And he says, let's get this done. Governor Cuomo has said, let's get rid of the silos of information and have better communication between all operating divisions. That means, let's get the job done now. I have been stonewalled for a meeting with Metro North forever. When I got stonewalled at the Port Authority over a small issue, the message came down, make it happen, and I met with 8 of the top people on a project that needs to be looked at. I have a question for you, Howard. You're ordering a control cab on every car you order. With the extended life of the trains, which you're very proud of correctly, for an 8-car train you only need 2 control booths. That means you are wasting the cost and maintenance and seating capacity of 6 control booths, which would then make it possible for the same money to buy a 9-car train for the price of an 8, which gives you a lot more seats. Now my question is, Howard, oh, by the way, Mitch, the reason I don't talk to Jim is because he doesn't talk to me. If I'm willing to have a conversation with anybody, if he's willing to talk to me, I'm willing to talk to him. Howard, why are you ordering a control cab in every car you buy? A complete waste of money, both original cost and maintenance-wise. And Mitch, if I can't ask that question from here, it's your responsibility to ask him that question, because there are literally millions of dollars being wasted because we're still ordering the same cars we always ordered.
Okay. We will make sure somebody gets back to you with the answer. I will make sure somebody gets back to you with the answer.
Before I leave today, because I'll be here for 5 meetings.
As quickly as it can be done. Thank you. I have no other public speakers. Approval of the minutes of March 26th. Any changes? Motion made, second. All in favor? Okay. Any changes to the work plan? No changes to the work plan. Agency president.
Mitch?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
I recall that we were going to have a an update on the time scheduling for East Side Access in May. I thought that was where all the TBDs were going to change. I understand but for May.
But that would be CPAC.
Well, it would be in CPAC, but Michael, if you're planning on doing it in May in CPAC, the change in scheduling for East Side Access, that's what Jim was asking about. For May. Okay, so we can provide information to this committee on the same day then, if whatever we need in that regard. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. No changes to the work plan. Long Island Railroad. Helena.
Good morning, committee. We're very pleased to start out with news on our on-time performance. Long Island Railroad has recorded its best first quarter of on-time performance ever, with a 96.17% of all trains system-wide running on schedule during the first 3 months of 2012. Each of the first 3 months in 2012 had a total system-wide OTP that exceeded 96%. The Long Island Railroad also achieved 100% on-time performance for 16 rush hours in the first quarter of 2012. 13 were in the morning, and 3, importantly, were in the evening, which, as you know, is the greater challenge for us. I would like to just take a moment and congratulate the entire Long Island Railroad workforce for this record. While we certainly benefited from a mild winter, and there's no question that contributed to this outstanding performance, we would not have achieved this without a concerted effort by all of our operating and frontline employees. And while we are certainly, very excited about these results, our goal, of course, is to continue to analyze events which cause 5 or more delays and see what else we can do to improve on-time performance. One of the items that we talked about last month, and I indicated to you that I would give more detailed information on, involved on-time performance by branch. The committee had asked that we analyze different goals that we set for each branch. We're continuing that evaluation. It's not complete for this month. Last month, as I indicated, we had looked at Herald to Penn. We're trying to break that down to even further look at the Penn performance. And we have worked to get some statistics that we need time to analyze on all the equipment coming out of Penn for both the other carriers, Long Island Railroad, and overall, what does that performance mean to us? So we anticipate we'll have that for you in May as we continue to analyze and break down OTP. On another note of really good news for Long Island Railroad, I am just really pleased to note that we're in our 7th consecutive month of ridership growth. March commutation increased by 2.7%, while non-commutation, again, that wonderful, weekend travel and off-peak travel increased by 4.2% in March. We'd like to acknowledge, of course, St. Patrick's Day played in just a huge role in the ridership growth, where we had 76,000 additional customers for St. Patrick's Day on that warm Saturday. But most importantly, we would note, specific items like monthly ticket sales were up 2,606. Weeklies were up by 488. So it's those ticket sales that are really the hard numbers that drive ridership increases. And I don't want to leave out, I had written a note on the Mets opening day. We wish them good luck this season. 5,325 on opening day, and that was a 16% increase in attendance, the best since 2009, an increase over last year. So we were very excited about that. I need to pause for a moment on an issue that we've been wrestling with at the Long Island Railroad. Last month we had 2 serious incidents involving assaults on train crews, and one involved an off-duty police officer. One occurred at Woodside, where a conductor was punched in the face, requiring 3 stitches. Another, occurred in Long Beach, where an off-duty officer actually assisted. The assailants were arrested by MTA police, so we want to very much thank MTA police for their very good police work on this. But the MTA police, Tom Odessa, Mike Cohen, and I have had some conversations. Anthony Simon, who is the head of the UTU union representing train crews, and I had some conversations, and the 3 of us came together and held a task force meeting to look at what we could do to reduce, train crew incidents. So we were looking at everything from assaults to just plain fare disputes. What can we do to lessen the chance that these incidents occur, that they result in injury? Of course, we want to reduce that. We go from, fair disputes that can involve everything from the assault to just plain old delay when the other customers then get agitated. We think that some of these disputes on overnight trains are being fueled by alcohol. And one of the things we're going to try on a pilot basis is to ban alcohol on overnight trains on Friday nights and Saturday nights. So, of course, Penn Station is open. Many people are using that as their last call to buy alcohol, beers, bring them on board. We think that continues to fuel some of the rambunctious behavior that we may be getting all the way up to, the criminal behavior we may be getting involving assaults. So our goal is to just see if we can reduce the number of incidents that are occurring. We're going to put in a ban in effect with this new timetable change May 14th. We'll do a lot of, notices at Penn Station, and we will work with MTA Police and Anthony Simon leadership at the union. Vinny Tessitore, I want to acknowledge Vinny's participation as well. Just to try to get a different tone on the trains that may lessen some of these disputes. So we'll report back on that.
Has anybody ever considered anything like legislation as far as assaulting a
It is a
employee?
felony. It is a felony charge.
That's greater than just punching another passenger?
Yes, it is. If you assault a train crew member, it's a felony assault automatically.
So that's already in place?
Right.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to be deterring, the age group we're involved with.
Yes,
Commissioner.
Charles?
Have you any statistics that show that the assaults were committed by people who were inebriated?
We have.
Our arrest reports always indicate the victim, not only the victim, but the perpetrator as well. And I could say in 95% of the cases, alcohol is involved. It's a rarity when it escalates to an assault and alcohol is not involved.
Benny, did you want to say something?
I just want to support this initiative. Obviously, coming from the rank and file, it's important to protect our train crews. I want to thank Helena and Mike and your group for working with us and hearing us on this. It's incredibly important. Chief Cohen and Chief Odessa, who's in the back as well, thank you. I think the key to success in this is train rides, is getting police on board these trains consistently to send a message to the young adults out there that are a little irresponsible at times. And I think we need to educate the communities that, parents of young adults need to understand that their children are out there and they may not be doing everything that's expected of them. And train crews shouldn't, no train crew member or a conductor should expect to come to work and get punched in the face, trying to just collect fares and do the right thing. We have too many more important things to do for the service here. So I'm confident this will work, and we're going to stay on board with you with it.
Yes.
Susan?
So the idea is that the alcohol will be stopped before the potential person boards the train?
That's correct. What we will do is, as people, descend down the staircases, to board trains, we will work with MTA police who are at Penn and staffing Penn anyway, to say, please throw that away. Don't bring that down. And we will, do advanced publication because, of course, people that have spent money on the beer then, are going to say, oh, I got to drink it. So we want to make sure they know, here's your last call at the Penn Station, restaurants and bars and kiosks that sell beer, but make sure you have time because you can't bring it downstairs.
I think you should put signs in the places where alcohol can be purchased, because it only seems to me to speed up an altercation between...
Right. But the good news,
But
it
if
won't
you
be
have
on
signs-
a train. Right. It'll be at the station. Yeah. So we're going to work on it. We're going to have signage everywhere. We're going to put notices out. And again, it's a pilot to see, does this actually reduce, incidents? So we're going to work on that. with MTA Board.
Helena did not have to question my commitment to that point. I don't think it goes far enough, but we'll start it that way, and we'll see what happens. Anything to protect our trained personnel is essential, and but we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this goes. Jonathan, do you want to say something? Your microphone is on.
My mic's on. Oh, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
He's
Okay,
testing.
go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
and then we have a final item in our report, and it's about the hours of service FRA regulation that went into effect on April 12, 2012. As you may recall, we had a prior procurement, and actually it was a joint procurement with Metro North and Long Island Railroad, where we obtained new software that's going to help us do what is known as fatigue management monitoring. Under the new regulation, we must monitor the number of hours employees in our train crews work. We had to classify employees type 1, type 2. Under type 1, you have to have 2 days off in 14 days. In type 2, you have to have 1 day off in 7 days. A type 2 employee is an employee who works, starting in the daytime into the night. So, of course, making sure that we can all monitor who's worked when and how many hours that totals up to has required, changes to our software. We are continuing to make improvements from an IT monitoring capability, sharing that with employees. One of the issues that I think confronts both railroads as we go forward under this regulation is what does it do to employee availability? And we need to make sure that we right-size the workforce to address the limitations on the workforce in terms of their own availability based on the hours of service requirement. So as that data comes forward, we're working together, looking at each railroad, what the impact is. We will share that with you. We had to file fatigue management plans with the FRA. They have 180 days to respond. We've met all those requirements, and we'll give you feedback as we get it. And that really concludes our report.
Any questions for Helena? Jonathan?
Yeah, I have a question on a different topic, just
Yes.
from the information item, please. It's on page 36, where you have 2011 final estimate.
We're going
versus
to get to
actual.
that, Jonathan. Just
Oh, you
hold
want
that.
me to
We'll
hold
get
it?
to that. Let's finish these, and then we'll get to that directly.
Okay.
Right, when we
That's
get to
okay.
that section.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Charles, I will also want you to let you know that, so you don't have to say anything more about Huntington, the President and I are meeting with the officials from Huntington next month to discuss the Huntington standee issue and other related topics.
I guess batting your head against the wall.
That always helps. Yeah.
As long as you don't give up.
I haven't got the capacity to give up.
Did you have?
I have a couple of quick questions.
Yes.
Throughout the presentation concerning Long Island Railroad, I see two issues. One, overtime reduction, and two, the potential for maintenance problems. And the overtime, overtime increase, not reduction. The overtime increase seems to fall in the maintenance area fairly heavily. At the same time, you have the usual breakdowns and the like. And my bottom line question is, to what extent are we impacting adversely upon the maintenance of equipment by the reductions in the workforce that have gone on in the past and seem to be ongoing?
I want to say that we have a reliability-centered maintenance program, and we are very confident that we are meeting the requirements of that program. In fact, this month we've had absolutely outstanding mean distance between failure on the fleet. Sometimes our mean distance between failure does fluctuate based on incidents in the diesel fleet because there's such small numbers. It has a disproportionate impact on the total numbers. With regard to overtime, let me say that we did have a slight increase in overtime. I'm going to ask Mark to address it. One of the issues is that we had unexpected surge of retirements that affected, a whole chain series of titles. With the biggest one being road car inspectors. But to get to be a road car inspector, there are preceding titles and years of experience. We did address it with additional training and brought in a class. And in fact, we actually had a good program in place that the UTU had supported, allowing us to bring carmen in, car appearance maintainers at a different level. So we are addressing it, but you are absolutely correct. We are very sensitive in those titles with regard to headcount, and we have to maintain that headcount in order to control overtime. Mark, can you be more specific?
Yes, good morning. I think you referred to the year-end report for 2011, and you're correct. Last year, the biggest driver, there were weather-related events, but the biggest driver other than that was vacancy coverage in maintenance of equipment. What we did, working with our HR department and Mike Gelomino from operations, we've developed a hiring plan for 2012 that gets us to the budgeted staffing levels, very close to the budget staffing levels by the end of the year. So that's our game plan in terms of filling those positions on the overtime to contain overtime. I would say, despite the numbers in 2011, year-to-date through the first 2 months of 2012, Long Island Railroad actually has 11% less hours worked and less dollars spent, which is a good thing. And when you look at the categories, the positive is virtually every category is down other than the vacancy coverage and M&V. So at least there we know where the issue is, and we've put a hiring plan in place, and I'm confident about that. And as Helena mentioned, despite the vacancies, the MDBF numbers have been strong.
Let me make my point. I am less concerned, although others think I'm nuts for taking that position, with the amount of overtime provided in terms of having people there and working. I am much more concerned with reliability of service, with the availability of equipment. And if that means more overtime, bless you, go forward. But you've got to get the equipment going. And if it's in any area that you need not to pay attention to, in terms of just cramming it down, it is in the maintenance of the equipment.
I'm going to just ask,
that's going to kill you.
Mike Gelomino, who is our Senior VP of Operations, who actually in his preceding position was Chief Mechanical Officer in charge of the fleet. I'm going to ask Mike just to address. I can assure you he's a loud voice on the issue you are speaking to.
Thank you, Elena. Commissioner, I recognize your concern, and there is an obvious relationship with man hours and a maintenance program, and we're on top of it. I can assure you we have an RCM program, and I happen to think it's a great program. I think it's a model for the country, for the industry to use sometime. Be more than happy to give you a presentation on our RCM program, Reliability-Centered Maintenance Program. Right now, the rolling average for MDBF, mean distance between failure, which is the metric we use to measure, we're at an all-time high. And the equipment, all the fleets are performing extremely, extremely well. We're very proud of the program, and that's that.
In fact, our RCM presentation is scheduled for May. This is an annual report to the committee that both railroads do.
Okay. We will look forward to it.
Good.
Any other questions for Helena on these items? If not, Howard?
Okay, good morning.
Wait,
Oh,
I mean,
No.
so much for waiting.
No. We're gonna. I apologize. I would appreciate it. It makes it a lot easier. The information item, we have not yet gotten to the information items. So when we get to the information items themselves, these are just agency reports on separate issues. It makes it a lot easier for an agenda purpose. When we get to the agency information and action items, we will go down them one by one, and then if people have questions on those specifically, that's how I would appreciate it.
No, that's
Are we on the year-end report?
No, we are not. We are on
We haven't got
Long
there
Island.
yet.
We have not gotten to that point yet.
okay. You know what?
it's fine,
Right.
but a lot of these are
I
in all
understand.
different places. My citing a page was to try and be helpful.
Right,
It
no, I
wasn't
understand that.
necessarily
I understand.
reflective that this is the only spot in
I
the whole
understand
400
that.
pages.
And I apologize that, but it makes it a lot easier if we go one by one.
That's fine.
Even for the person taking the minutes, it makes it a lot easier to go one by one. Okay.
Okay.
Howard, on
Okay. It's good
agency
morning
president
again.
report.
Right, good morning again.
First.
So I had a few things I wanted to highlight. First, I want to highlight our on-time performance for Metro North. This is Metro North's best first quarter in the railroad's history. Our trains are now running at 98.8% on time, which is, in my view, a phenomenally high number. The reasons are similar to what Helena spoke to. We're talking about a continual focus across the organization of providing excellent train service. We're talking about getting more M8s, which is eliminating the problems we had in the New Haven, and of course the mild winter absolutely helped. But I think more than anything, it's the continued focus of the entire management and both agreement and non-agreement teams to make this happen is how you end up with those numbers. MDBF is extremely high. That continues to increase. It's almost 250,000 miles in February. We have had, on the cautionary side, there are a couple of things. We did have a major event a couple of weeks ago with a major fire in Stratford, Connecticut, which shut the line for a few hours. We actually had a fire yesterday off the right-of-way that shut the line again to New Haven for a few hours. So with the rain, hopefully that risk will be diminished. We continue to have two other things that we keep an eye on very closely. The state of Connecticut is, as you know, rebuilding the very overaged catenary system. We have again given them 2 tracks out of service in 7 miles in the middle of the line. So that puts that operation at significant risk. If anything goes wrong, trains back up. And we're also, as part of trying to achieve the efficiencies we've talked about in the capital program, we are taking what I would call measured risks in how we're doing track work. So we are taking tracks out longer. We're doing different things so we can save some money. It puts the operation, again, it's a little bit more risk, and we balance those on a decision-by-decision basis, case-by-case basis. On the consist side, I'm really pleased to say that we finished March at 99.9% consist compliance. A particular note, again, is just a couple of years ago on the New Haven line, we were looking at 80%, so this is a huge improvement for our New Haven line customers. I will mention on the issue Helena raised about the late-night trains, I think everyone knows Metro North does not run through the night. Our last trains leave at 2 a.m. in the morning from Grand Central. We have similar issues. We work very closely. I want to thank Mike and the MTA police on these kinds of issues. So we'll watch to see what happens with the Long Island Railroad, and if we have to make any adjustment, we will do so. On the M8s, we now are up to 90, I believe it's 96 cars are in service. That's almost a quarter of the fleet. We're now running about 30% of the weekday service and 35% of weekend service are now the new cars. Customers continue. All feedback is extremely positive. We also kicked off our full-fledged quiet car program in early April. That so far to date has been very, very well received by our customers. They really like it. With regard to ridership, the February information is in the book. I do want to make one point, though, is that while ridership is literally surging across the system, the one place that's different is on the Port Jervis line, where ridership is still down, but the rate of decline is getting reduced. So in December, we're down like 25%. In February, it's now 18% as people come back to the train after that 3 or 4 month hiatus after Tropical Storm Irene. March, very positive. Ridership was up 3.6%. East of Hudson was 3.7%. Similar to what Helena described, our non-commutation ridership continues to increase at a greater rate than a commutation ridership. And we, too, attribute this all to, again, it's both good service and it's also the weather's been good, so people are traveling when the weather is good, particularly over the winter months. So year-to-date, we're up about 4.5%, which was excellent, and we're on track to be the highest ridership year in the history of Metro North. So that we're going well there. A couple other things I mentioned on ridership. One is we have seen no discernible loss from the January Connecticut fare increase. You may recall fares for travel to and from Connecticut went up like 7%. And also we are seeing a very significant increase in intermediate ridership. It's up 9% through March. And then on the Connecticut part of the New Haven line, it's up 14%. So we're seeing, and those are the trips to and from places like Greenwich and Stamford. Similar to Helena's report on our Yankee Stadium service, we carried about 5,100 fans to the opening day. That was that was the highest regular season day ever for Metro North at that station. Financial results continue to be positive. We are under budget on operating side. We're over budget on ridership. Our injuries continue to go down. In March, we were down about 35%. Unfortunately, April has not been as good a month. We've lost some of that, and so we're continuing to focus on job safety briefings and safety audits. I do want to take a minute to mention two other items. One is to recognize four Metro North employees who really did heroic efforts, and they were honored by the Connecticut region of the American Red Cross. These are for actions they took as they or honored as organizations 2012 heroes of the greater New Haven area. These four individuals who are not here today: Phil Willamy, Bob Duty, Mike Bueno Atto, and Frank Langston, all received an award. And what they did was they rescued a trespasser who was in our New Haven line wires on the transmission poles. He climbed up there. And they helped rescue him, got him down, and most importantly, they prevented any other fatalities to the firefighters from West Haven who were responding to this rescue effort. This guy got himself tangled up in the wires. So these are terrific examples of the work that people in Metro North do. I will be recognizing them later this week in a ceremony in New Haven. And finally, since it's Earth Week and sustainability, to mention two things. One is that we received our first LEED certification building. This is a independent third-party group who verifies buildings designed and built using strategies aimed at getting high performance in key areas of human and environmental health, and our 525 North Broadway building received that award. Secondly, and Chairman Loda had a press conference yesterday on this in Grand Central. In Grand Central, we are undertaking with NYPA a huge energy efficiency project. It's the biggest one MTA has done with NYPA across the entire system. And what they are doing is they are replacing the equipment that cools, heats, and ventilates Grand Central. And by doing so, we're going to reduce energy consumption by 30%. Save $3 million a year, and reduce carbon emissions by 10,000 tons. And it may not be well known, but within Grand Central is a huge infrastructure of steam, pipes, and assorted support facilities. In fact, Metro North is one of the largest steam providers of steam in the United States, supplying some of the neighboring buildings. And this project will now replace all the old stuff that we have there with some new chillers, and it will... from a financial standpoint, what happens is the upfront cost is borne by NYPA, so they put it in. Then we pay them back over the course of the savings we get over. So it's basically there's no out-of-pocket cost to us. They get the savings, and when it's done, we then own the equipment and get the savings as well. So it's been an excellent project. We should be done by the end of next year, and it's one that we're very pleased to be part of with NYPA. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Howard? Charles?
I won't jump the agenda.
That's quite all right.
First, I congratulate you on superb service. It shows up at every stage of your operation. I wanted to emphasize a point that you have just taught again, and that is when you reduce service, inevitably you have greater reductions in service and a real job getting people back, as evidenced by Port Jervis. That lesson is one that would be well taught to the people who run the buses. It is a lesson that's well taught across the system, and I think it's one that's worth noting.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, capital construction, Mike.
Okay, sorry. The concrete work and excavation in the cavern under the Grand Central is actually proceeding very well. In fact, the contractor continues to perform better as compared to the schedule that they agreed in the settlement. So if they continue to do that, we hope to even finish before he originally expected. The excavation at the 50th Street vent facility, in fact, we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel has been completed, and now we are concreting it. In Queens now, the mining of Tunnel D, that is the third tunnel, started March 26th, and they are actually proceeding extremely well. And the second TBM is right now been moved in position to start mining the Tunnel BC. I'm going to give you a little presentation on that, and that's going to happen most probably before the end of this month. So this week, beginning of next week, we're going to start Tunnel BC. Important, we had probably one of the most critical and most risky of the tunneling jobs is 120 feet under Northern Boulevard. Happy to report that we have been able to freeze the area successfully, and we expect to start excavation end of this week, beginning of next week. So actually that is really good news for us. Another thing is the fact that we had a major weekend track outage that took place last weekend of March, and we were able to, in effect, replace 19 catenary poles and structures that were erected. And that's, I'm going to showcase that because that's the type of work that we need to do in order to advance our schedule. The bids were received March 27 for the 55th Street vent plant, and we did receive a bid protest that is going to be settled this week, and we look forward and anticipate that by late spring we will be able to award the contract. In general, Amtrak that in effect they completed installation of some rails in the ERTs, will resume installation of new switches for us in May, and this is after about 2 months that they've not done that. So in general, things are moving along at this point. We are in a risk analysis mode. We are working with the FDA, the IEC, and internally in order to be able to come up with the updated schedule and budget. And at this point, we're planning for May, and that's where we are. I would like to actually walk you first to the BC tunnel. Is that the first one? Great. And this is the original structure was supposed to end some 500 feet away from the 39th Street bridge that you see in effect. I don't know, you can't see anything. Sorry. Okay. That's the 39th Street bridge, and the reason we have stopped originally, what we wanted to stop, is because the coverage, the cover of the tunnel is getting thinner and thinner, and by the time actually we're getting very close to the bridge, would be only about 10 feet below the tracks. We have worked out a technical solution with the Long Island Railroad that implies a lot of operational changes, and Illinois would touch base on that. But in order to, we did that in order to avoid, in effect, a cut and cover operation that it's very intrusive in adjacent tracks. We needed to preserve and cross over for the longer duration, so that's where actually the various changes the Long Island Railroad has to work on. and we really wanted to reduce the need for railroad resources as well as future eastbound reroute construction duration. By initiating the construction early, basically, originally was supposed to be almost 2 years later than what we're doing it, we're going to be able to reduce the risks going forward. There are some prerequisite activities that are critical to accomplishing that. We need to relocate catenary structures because we are tunneling either very close or under, as well as underpinning one of the CILs. So that is being accomplished and will be accomplished by June in order for us to be able to move on, and in effect we'll be start our operation at the beginning of July. I would like then to actually ask Elena to go over the operational issues involved.
If you can just go back to that first slide of the actual construction. No, back to the first one. Right here. I'm just going to pause for a moment. We always refer to 813 as a switch, and while it is a switch and it allows the crossover from these tracks to these tracks, it is actually a much longer piece of track. So while we refer to it as a switch, it is also, a connection by track that is extremely important to our operation. So we've spent a lot of time reviewing the proposal that Eastside Access came forward with. And their proposal was to avoid the cut and cover, increase constructability in the whole area by doing this now. But because we would have to take 813 out of service while they're doing this, it had some significant operational impacts. This is the crossover from, the south side tracks to the north side tracks. It has a particular challenge for us in the PM, which, as this committee knows, is always our most difficult on-time performance part of our operation. Normally, 9 rush hour trains in the PM use that crossover so that they use East River Tunnel number 3 to mainline track number 1. These routes are also used for track and construction outages at other various times when we have a service disruption. That's probably the most important. It's a safety valve if there's another type of service disruption. There will be 3 routes that are actually lost. Port Washington, track 1 to mainline 3, as well as mainline 1 to the line 2 connector. But those routes are used less frequently. There's less impact on the AM when we take this switch out of service, but again, it's a safety valve in the AM as well. There are some other routes that we can sometimes use. So, long story short is, after much back and forth, and we actually asked Michael, isn't there any other way to do this? What are the other opportunities? We both concluded, that the best constructability solution was to take the switch out, limit the amount of time the switch is out, and do everything we can to protect service when we lose the flexibility of having this, particularly in the PM. So you will see in a later staff summary, we are identifying this as something that will have an impact on our scheduled service this summer. We've worked hard to develop, particular milestones, which Michael talked about. The catenary has to be relocated. We have to be ready with certain protections to different signal troughs in the area. With all of that in place, we will then take that switch out for approximately 3 weeks. I keep asking Alan Paskoff, couldn't you do it faster? He keeps saying he's going to try. But it will allow for the TBM to do a continuous mining operation, no stop and start. And those additional feet, we will get a benefit later on when they aren't trying to do cut and cover in the middle of one of the most congested interlockings in North America. So for 3 weeks, we will operate without that crossover capability. It has an impact in the PM that we think we can address by redirecting some of the train traffic. It will result in 3 trains being canceled. Of course, the greatest issue for us is if anything else happens, then we've lost redundancy and flexibility. So that is always the biggest challenge operationally. And we're going to do everything we can to staff up, locate, protect equipment, additional crews. Again, what we have to worry about is if anything else happens, if an Amtrak train or an NJT train obstructs anything, then we would have a significant impact on Penn. We have more that we'll discuss about the actual trains later in the summer. That schedule is still being worked out. Back to you, Michael.
Okay, what I would like to do is just give you an overview of what it takes to actually do work on a weekend and move poles and catenaries and some of the bridges that we have to move around. So I would like to start by actually showing you the normal train route that normally Long Island Railroad takes in and out, and then as we move along, this is the operational conflicts that we had when we tried to do certain amount of work. Next, please. So what can we do in order to do that work? First thing, we have the East River Tunnel lines 1 and 3 out of service, mainline tracks 1 and 3 out of service, the eastbound Long Island passenger and Port Washington 2 out of service, Con Ed outage of the power line, and then we have to create double temporary platforms at Woodside, Forest Hills, and Kew Gardens. Anyone that does not know, there are 3 tracks there, so going eastbound we have to provide, in effect, extend the platform so it can be useful. As well as we need to have about 250 people from Long Island Railroad, Amtrak, and the contractor to do this work. Now, mind you, that from an engineering point of view, it's not such a big deal. But from an operational point of view as to how you choreograph all these things, it's a real big deal. These are the tracks, the ones that are in I guess, orange, are the out of service. The rest are, these are the southern outage. And what you're seeing here is west, and we're looking west and east of 39th Street, and it doesn't seem like a lot. We have 1 signal bridge, 3 catenary poles, 1 catenary truss, and then on Saturday night we're working in effect nights, right? So that's really the 12:30 to 7 in the morning, and then we having here the catenary pole. Then east of 39 again 5, 3 cantilever section, another 4, and another cantilever section. In total, we have 19 pieces of work. I just want to get you just to see. This is a signal bridge. It's a removal, so we have to cut it off the pedestal, and then we have to lift it with a crane and take it away. Then this is installing a catenary truss. This is really over a number of lines, so that's, it shows you an installation again is moved with a crane. This is the cantilever arms that have to be placed, and you can even see the extension in orange there. That this is the the 2 pieces of equipment putting it in place. This is what we refer as the K-frame catenary. Think of it as a little suspended bridge that we put over. This is where the span is smaller. Again, all of these things need to happen. The catenaries, there is a lot of power that needs to get cut off. You have to move over rails that some of them are energized, some not. So that's really a very dangerous and a delicate operation. And in the process of doing that, we have done some other stuff. We removed a retaining wall. We started the the jacking pit for the microtunnel. We provided a protective box. So all of these things need to happen at night, and we need outages. So what I'm trying to impress on you is the fact that, go next, in order to achieve what we need to achieve, this is going to give you an indication of what we need to get done in total, okay? And if you see new switches, to date we've done 21. We need another 71 new switches to install. If you look at the linear feet of new track as well as the signal troughs, these are significant amounts. Catenary poles and signal towers, we still have to install 246 of them. So all of these things take a long time because everything has to be choreographed that while we are riding, while the passengers are going to ride the trains, we need to do our work. So that's never going to be an easy thing to achieve. I just want to give you a feel of what we're doing here and how that needs to be done. So achieving a good cooperation from Amtrak, working with Long Island Railroad, is really critical in us being able to deliver this project on a timely basis. That's it.
Question for MTA Construction. Charles?
I noticed that this project was going to start on July 6th, the work that had been discussed.
The
by
BC tunnel, yes.
My question is, wouldn't it be possible to start over the weekend so that you can save 2 days of commuting time?
We are trying not to impact what may be a long 4th of July weekend when we have, tremendous operational requirements. So we picked the 6th. After much discussion.
Are you saying you need more
Alan?
service over
Yeah.
the weekend than on the Monday going back to work, or the Tuesday?
No, the 6th. The 6th is a
The 6th is a Friday.
Friday.
The
Friday.
4th of July is a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday, so we're we did not want to start the weekend before. We wanted to leave the 4th
Right.
as what might be a long weekend
Right.
for people.
Susan?
Michael, I want to congratulate you on a successful Northern Boulevard freeze. I know that was a technically touchy aspect of the project, and you've had a lot of angst about it. Does it mean that you've stopped any water infiltration?
Yes, that's exactly
Terrific.
what I mean. And
That's
actually,
great.
I think we achieved the cover. We needed to have a 6-foot frozen zone arch.
And
so
you've
I
got
think
it.
that we've got that.
That's terrific.
That's great.
I hope the excavation goes as well.
We touch wood, right?
And I had a question for you. The 3 trains that you have to cancel for the afternoon, are you able to expand the consist on the remaining trains or make some allowance for those passengers?
And actually, we'll be giving you more details on that. It's actually 9 trains that use that crossover and, go east on the westbound tracks in the PM. So of the 9, 3 need to be canceled, and the other 6 are being distributed through the schedule and combined with some other trains. So we are still writing that schedule, and we will have that for you probably in June. Service planning is still working on it. Like anything, you can't just pick the 9 that cross over because that could have a disproportionate impact on those customers. So we're spreading it throughout. And we're hoping this will be a very short period that we're doing this.
Short is the appropriate term.
Yes.
Ira, did you have something?
Yeah, just going forward, I mean, I'd like to see what the plan is regarding Harold and the installation of signal equipment or the resignaling of Harold and how that's being coordinated. I mean, I noted in this work we have Long Island Railroad, we have Amtrak, and I guess we have the contractor also all involved working together. And just in light of the issues at Jamaica, we want to make sure that when whatever signal work is done at Harold and completed, that everything is done properly to avoid any problems. And just going forward, I'd love to see who's doing what work and how well is it being coordinated with the other 2 parties and contractors.
We'll endeavor to do so. But just so you know, no work gets done unless it's coordinated with Amtrak and Long Island Railroad. So we don't get to go
what
there.
I'm talking about is the end result. We don't want something. We don't want there to be a problem in the future because a mistake was made. In installation. I mean,
I just want to address,
Yes.
I think you're raising a very important point that I've actually spent some time already with my staff and have had discussions with Alan Paskoff, who has contractors doing the signal design. One of the efforts as a result of the lightning strike in Jamaica last September was to look at our lightning protection standards. So one of the things that is key to our review of those standards is to make sure that we are in sync with what is the appropriate standard in Harold for Eastside Access construction. And if that's appropriate for Harold, is it appropriate in other places on the railroad? So we are working right now to make sure that that lightning protection standard is in sync. So you raise a very timely and pertinent point.
Just so you know, there's a designer on board. We have a quality control consultant that goes over that design. And ultimately, a lot of it, actually, if not all of it, that needs to be approved by Amtrak. Okay? So, trust me, there are multiple belts and suspenders.
But with that being said, we thought we had lots of belts and suspenders for the J. Hall and Dutton signal cutover as well, and we proved that those belts and suspenders were not adequate, and we are addressing that institutionally to tighten up how we approach it. So coordination with Eastside Access is extremely important.
Good. Okay. MTA Police. Chief?
Good morning. I'm just going to talk about March real quickly, then I want to mention some incidents that have been happening up in Westchester County that have received some media attention. Happy to report in March we were down with 28 incidents compared to 31 last year during March. We had no robberies on the system for March. We did have 19 larcenies compared to 20 last year. 2 of those involved electronic devices. We had 2 burglaries compared to none in 2011. We made an arrest on one of those burglaries. We talked about assaults earlier with the Long Island Railroad report. We did have 7 assaults compared to 5 last year. 6 of those assaults were closed by arrest, and 2 of those, as mentioned, did involve the Long Island Railroad conductors, and 1 actually involved the conductor in Staten Island. As I mentioned, there's been some media reports about robberies up in Westchester. There have been 8 robberies beginning in January through April 9th of this year. 7 of those 8 have involved Metro-North customers. I just want to point out that none of those occurred on a train, none of those or on any Metro-North property. All the victims had exited, or 7 of the 8 victims had exited Metro-North train, exited the station. They were walking home. 3 of those incidents happened in Pelham, 2 in Mamaroneck. Harrison had 2, and New Rochelle had 1. All of the victims were robbed at gunpoint. It happened between 8 at night and 5 o'clock in the morning. There's no indication that the individual is on our train. I believe he approaches the victims on foot and then flees for a short while, and then flees a short space and then jumps in a car and takes off. We are working with the Westchester Police Department and the local police departments, both uniform and detective divisions. They've put together a very aggressive response plan. We're going to continue to work with them and monitor the situation until this individual is captured. So I just wanted to mention that because it's been on the news a couple of times, and every time it comes on, I know your phones are probably ringing, my phone's ringing, and but we are aware of it, and we're going to maintain a vigilance. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Thank you for that explanation. But the data for the ones you just mentioned in Westchester is not in your report?
Exactly.
It's not on our property.
Exactly.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Charles?
Chief, at some time, could you give us the arrest statistics as well as the crime statistics?
The monthly arrest reports, which that should be in the book.
Page 32.
Yeah.
Did you look at page 32?
I'm looking at the, oh, I see, okay,
Page 32.
got it.
If you'd like any further explanation, I'm sure the chief can provide it at any time, but I know this was as our request to put in. Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Okay? Good. Agency information and action items, starting with Long Island. Delina.
Our final review of 2011 operating results is in the book, and we're happy to take any questions. And I know that Commissioner Balin had a question.
Can't remember it.
That's part of our strategy.
No, I can't. That was a joke. Excuse me. Keep trying.
Page 36.
Thank you very much. I think it's good we have a structure and an order, so I'll try and move within it. But the question was jumped a little, and that's fine. But it was on the overtime, and I share, the concerns expressed with reliability being of central importance. But just a slight response. The notion that more overtime is generally good, I don't support. And I just, obviously, sometimes it's going to be necessary, and that's why we budget for it, that's why we talk about it. And I think in the interest of time, perhaps you don't have to address the answer to this question now, because I want to help you keep the flow. But I would like an explanation of the corporate initiatives that you refer to on page 36 with respect to overtime, to help determine that, at least in my view, if the optimal balance of staffing and overtime is being met. And I realize that's difficult, or at least being addressed. So feel free to either review it now if you think you can, or please call me tomorrow.
Okay. Mark, who's been head of my overtime task force since 2009. Mark, can we do a really quick response, and then we can follow up tomorrow as well?
Sure. I would say, again, as Lena mentioned, we have an overtime task force. Staff is meeting, every week, reviewing the figures. But as a task force, we meet quarterly to review the numbers, identify where we have issues, and then make sure departments have corrective action plans. In some of the cases of the categories of overtime that caused issues last year, relate to staffing, which was a topic that came up before. So that would be one component, would be making sure we have a hiring plan in place that we can achieve, that factors in training time, the length of training time, etc. Apart from that, apart from staffing issues, we have other categories of overtime that also need to be addressed, such as availability. So we have a separate sub-task force that's working on a series of measures that are designed to improve availability, so that we have employees at less need to fill positions on overtime due to absences. So if you want more detail, I could certainly, if you want more detail on the availability initiative, that would be one example. We have other examples where, even apart from availability, department heads have come to us and identified more efficient ways to deploy staff related to tour assignments, etc., in transportation, M&V, that are other components. It's a broad initiative.
How would you characterize your success or failure in the initiative?
I would say, well, certainly through 2010, we had dramatic reductions in overtime, and that was largely the work of the same group of people, the management team, people in the field. Last year, while we did exceed budget, we had very ambitious budget targets. The good news was, for the most part, we had retained the progress we had made in the prior years. So that was a good sign. But we've definitely identified the two things we have to focus on in 2012 are the open jobs and availability. So, those are things we acknowledge we need to work on.
I tell you what, I have a few follow-up questions, but there's really no benefit to doing it right now. Could you just call me in my office tomorrow or when it's convenient this week?
Right.
Thank
But
you.
very good. We will schedule that with your office.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Charles?
Yeah.
I'm not sure why you do this, but at page 66, you indicate in footnote 2 that you have adjusted the fare box operating ratio and cost center. per passenger indicators to provide comparability between LIRR and Metro North. And so my first question is, why do you do it? Number two, when you do it, it reveals that MNR is significantly more advantageous in terms of, and I chose that word deliberately, in terms of ratios. So, for example, the cost per passenger is $11.77 at Metro North, and after adjustment, it's $12.19, and prior to adjustment, it's $14 at LIR. And I'm trying to figure out, A, why do you go through that exercise? B, after you've done it, how do you justify the gap?
This was a major topic for this committee in 2011. It may have preceded your appointment to this committee.
It was at my request, okay? Because what was happening was that we were not comparing apples with apples.
Fine. Now that you've done it, tell me why we're not doing as well in Long Island.
She can tell you why that. Go ahead. That was why it was done.
We clearly will, provide some additional detail for you on that. One of the biggest items that affects Long Island Railroad's fare box operating ratio is the unfunded pension liability from a closed pension that existed from 1973, created by a strike, closed in 1988 by a strike. It was completely unfunded. It was, here's a extraordinary pension benefit for which the company did not put away any funding, nor did the employees who did not contribute to it. The pension plan was closed in '88. We've carried the unfunded pension liability. We began a review in the 2000s. It predated me, to identify what was the cost of now funding that pension liability. And it is an extraordinary cost, which we have now identified. We've begun funding through a operating investment plan. So we felt that we should be given credit for the fact that that predated our modern operation. So we do an adjustment for that unfunded pension liability. But to your point, we are still a much more expensive operation than Metro North. Metro North was created in 1983. It took a 60-day strike to clean out many of their old work rules. Long Island Railroad carries work rules from 1944. And they're very expensive work rules. And they drive up our costs in a way that we have to focus on and look at. And that's one of the dialogues I've been having with all of our labor organizations. And, Vinny will confirm, one of the things that I talk about all the time is work rules and the cost of those work rules. They make us a very expensive operation.
And they make for happier employees.
Of course, the employees who might get 2 days' pay for 1 day's work are very happy.
I have an obvious bias in that regard.
Well, but you also, I would say, would look at some of our taxpayer requirements and say, are those work rules efficient for us to carry forward in 2012 when they originated in 1944?
It has been my experience that negotiation and bargaining can achieve results in that area.
Yes,
well, and
that's our goal.
And that's what's going on at the moment. That's what's going on at the moment.
And I want to be clear, we're not negotiating in public. We're just highlighting why we're an expensive operation.
Ira, do you have something else?
Something. No, this is something much easier, I hope. And the headcount chart on page 52. There's a couple of categories, and I don't know if there's an explanation now, but particularly human resources, and I said procurement and logistics, I think information technology, and maybe just the different organizations between Long Island Railroad and Metro North, where there's significantly more headcount in Long Island Railroad than there is in Metro North. That may be because of classifications, I don't know. The Metro North headcount page is page 93.
We would have to, Howard and I would have to ask our staffs to look at that. We each have perhaps some different categories. So we would ask Kim and Mark to look at it and
Okay.
get back to you.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could do that. Thanks.
Okay, in the interest of keeping moving, we
Inventory.
have page 67, our inventory report.
Whoa, Charles has one
Okay.
more question.
I
Go ahead.
have one question, and you
Page 58.
Hit your button,
I'm
Charles.
sorry.
Go ahead.
If you look at page 58, you will see that, if I read this correctly, that the non-commutation tickets and revenue is reasonably stable, while the commutation portion is down over a period of years. All right? Now, my question really would be, are you comfortable that that is the result of the economy, or is there something else that we need to do that we haven't done to bring that up?
Well, I think if you look at the dates, you can see that in 2008 we had record ridership. It was our highest since, World War II. And the recession, the Great Recession, occurred in October 2008, which then you can see the immediate fall off, which I think we've been talking about consistently until last October, when we finally saw the turnaround, October 2011, almost, 3 years of that Great Recession, and we're starting to see the turnaround. And I mentioned to you the increase.
Why does it impact more heavily on commutation as contrasted with non-commutation?
I think commutation represents the heart of employment. And in fact, I pointed out that our mail-in ride is up by over 2,000, new subscriptions or reinstatement of subscriptions. That is the heart of employment, is commutation.
Okay. Inventory, page 67.
Okay, I know we need to make up some time here, but I am going to go quickly to say I've had an inventory task force since 2009. By the end of 2011, we achieved a budget-recognized cash savings in excess of $24 million, $14 million in 2010, and $10.4 million in 2011. I just want to compliment Mark Young and his task force on inventory management, along with Dennis Mann. Dennis is here. They have done an outstanding job of trying to address inventory controls, inventory reductions at Long Island Railroad. If there are any questions, we're happy to take those.
Any questions on inventory? If not, spring-summer schedule change, page 73.
Okay, and that is our summer service schedule. This is a staff summary to inform you of the changes that result from 3 categories you'll see in this staff summary. Summer construction activities, our service guideline review, and our track work program. Under the summer construction activities, you can see there's a focus on, tie installations, grade crossings, some issues that we are trying to do on the main line to create work windows overnight for east side access, and a cable replacement. And all of those have various impacts on schedules, which we provide some detailed background on. Under service guideline review, we undertook a review of our own guidelines against the frequency of service and the ridership patterns that we were experiencing. We focused on Port Washington and Ronkonkoma. As you will note, a result of that effort is that we will be restoring the midday service on Port Washington. That's the off-peak service. We were able to do that actually by remanipulating train schedules and getting more efficiency out of our crews, which allowed us to do this with no additional crew costs. There will be traction power costs that are associated with it, but we think that the revenue gain that we will get by customers returning to our system will offset that. And this is one where I have to pause and say, there was a lot of work that went into the 2010 service reductions. This was a very difficult period for Long Island Railroad to actually have to take away service based on the budget crisis we were in. We thought that these customers would go to hourly service, and in fact, they did not. They simply left the system. So now we need to work hard to get them to come back to our off-peak service. Ronkonkoma service, that will be a train that we put in September. We would probably try to put it in sooner, but we're too impacted by the East Side Access service, so we will do that in September. And then on the track work program, we've already spent some time talking about that. That's the BC tunnel operation, which requires us to reduce 3 trains and really reconfigure 9 others. And we will come back to you in June with a more detailed, service announcement about that. But we wanted to highlight it in this staff summary because it's part of what we will note in the May timetable. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions? Susan?
Will you be tracking the ridership return on these 14 trains that you're reinstating?
We certainly will be tracking that ridership.
Just as Commissioner Mordler said that the Port Jervis line rebound is a good study, this is a very good study too.
Yep.
And it gives us a focus not only on commutation and non-com, but this is really a non-com kind of focus. Right. So it would allow us to see what we can do during those non-com times.
Yep.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
So do you know when you'll know? When you'll be able to report?
We reinstitute it with the May 14th timetable. We're going to do some advanced publicity and marketing and notification to our customers. I suspect that we will, see some early results. We'll be reporting back to you. I'll give you early results in May and June.
Okay.
And then we'll keep tracking.
Terrific. Thank you.
Anyone else on these items? Okay, if not, Metro North information items. Howard, page 77.
Okay, thank you. Yes, on our inventory and report, this has been a goal of ours now for the better part of 4 or 5 years. The report lays out the successes we've had. We've been very pleased in our ability to maintain, not only improve our service levels, but we've been reducing the cost of inventory and the cost of buying material. This past year in 2011, we reduced inventory levels by $4 million. We reduced the cash we needed to buy materials by $2.8 million, and that's net of the impacts of all the storms we had, which significantly increased material requirements. And our service level went up as well. This is an effort that really cuts across, again, many parts of Metro North. It's led by Anthony Bombace in our procurement department. Anthony works very closely with many of the operating departments, and we constantly, the focus is basically determining what we are buying, how much we're buying, and when we're buying it to make sure it's the right amount. So we've taken, under that general view of strategic procurement, we've taken a number of actions. What I want to highlight is one is joint procurement. So we did about $124 million of joint procurements during 2011. We did a significant amount of asset disposition. And we've also made 2 organizational changes. Within our maintenance of way department, we have now centralized responsibility for all maintenance of way material in a specialized department. As opposed to having it out in our different subdivisions, that is going to give us significant benefit. It already has. And we're also using just-in-time inventory for Grand Central. So that has allowed us to reduce somewhat the storage requirements in Grand Central where there's no space. And we're basically able to do just-in-time, and that's worked quite well. So we'll continue to focus on this. You may recall as well, the other thing is you had approved the purchase of a model for us to determine how much inventory we should have for many of our different parts. We spent about $500,000 on that last year. We made back the $500,000 in the first year, and it will continue to help us as we go forward. It will be a great return on investment. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on either of those 2 reports, the end-of-the-year report or the inventory report for Metro North?
Jim has one.
Jim?
Some of us old-timers will remember that one of the big factors that Lillian Affinito stressed was inventory control. And I can remember when I first came on, the first committee that I sat on was an inventory control committee headed by Lillian. And she would be very happy because our inventory was out of control back in 1994. So congratulations are in order for both of you. Thanks.
Thank you. I skipped over. I'm sorry. Oh,
Charles?
Howard, I have a quick question. The inventory you maintain, is that inventory just for MNR, or is it shared with the rest of the system?
No, the vast majority would be just for us. There might be a few exceptions that don't come to mind, but it's Metro North.
Is it possible to centralize the inventory so it can be drawn upon by Long Island Railroad, City Transit in some cases and the like?
Well, in certain cases, we do that. So we have, I can recall recently when we had trouble with traction motors a few years ago, and the Long Island Railroad gave us traction motors. So I remember that. There are times, Chuck, during, particularly during weather events or really unusual things where the railroads and transit will make those kinds of swaps, if you will.
Do you have computerized information available to the other entities so that they could draw on it if needed?
Yeah, Anthony, you want to just speak to that for a minute?
We use the same system, PeopleSoft system. It's a consolidated system for all the agencies. So my inventory can be viewed by Dennis Mann at Long Island, which can be viewed at the New York City Transit. So
terrific.
we're all on the same system.
In fact, I have to take credit. A few years ago, I think Anthony, Dennis, Howard, and I specifically had an initiative to make sure that we were coding part numbers the same way so that the systems could be more transparent.
I skipped over the year-end report. Were there any questions on that?
No? Okay. Why don't we go to the...
we have a Portchester.
Heartland?
We have one there.
Yes,
Heartland, yeah.
yes.
So we have an information item. This will be brought to the Finance Committee for approval. This is the net leasing of the Portchester building to Heartland Brewery. This is an effort we're very pleased about. We have, over the past years, had a consistent effort to try to improve the service we provide to our customers, as you know, as well as to save money, and particularly doing it as part of leasing our stations. So this is the 9th station building to be in our net leasing program. It's a major win-win for everybody. In the first instance, we will get more rent than we've been getting. Secondly, they will put in over $1 million of improvements to the Portchester building. Thirdly, we will fund, but they will manage a roof replacement in a way that we think they'll be able to do it more effectively than we could have. In addition, the hours that the station will now be open for our customers will be dramatically increased. We're keeping the ticket window office open, but now it's about 8 hours on weekdays, and it'll now become closer to 16 hours, 7 days a week. In addition, from a local standpoint, we'll have 60 to 70 jobs will be created in Portchester as part of this project, and we'll have a central attraction that people can go to in Portchester. So this is an absolute win-win. We're very pleased to be part of this.
The attraction, the availability of beer to take onto the train?
Right. No, it's actually, it's a brewery, but this is actually it's going to be more than just drinking. There are actually other stands and other food they'll have there. So it should be basically a food and beverage attraction.
Jonathan?
It sounds like a great notion, the idea of leasing the station to a productive use. And I understand the analysis of win-win. I have a couple of questions with respect to the specific lease, however.
Okay.
Just to make sure that the process led to the best results. So I have a couple of questions. The discount rate of 9% that was used in the analysis,
right,
with 10-year treasuries at 4%, that just seems like a very high rate to use in a present value analysis. And I have a couple more questions.
Okay, so, Jonathan, maybe we can do that. I would ask either Neil or Jeff Rosen will have to get back to you. That's a standard real estate approach. So one of them will have to explain the choice of 9.
All right, so let me give a couple more of the
All
quick
right.
questions that maybe Jeff can get back to me on. The Heartland estimates it'll spend $1.2 million on the build out.
Right.
How do we know that they don't decide to spend $800,000 instead as they're going
All right.
along?
Okay, let me
Which
get back
savings
to
are
right.
fine, but I want to make sure we're getting what we
Right,
think
absolutely.
we're
Yeah, we'll get back to you on how we'll monitor that.
getting. And then the last question is, how do we know
Finance.
on the flip side of that, how do we know that the costs are controlled and that it's whatever's being constructed at our request, including the roof,
Right.
and,
Well, right.
the build out is being done at appropriate cost control.
Right. We let us get back to you on all three. I'm confident that we will have a specification with in a manner in which we can monitor we are getting what we're paying for.
And then the final question is, I would have no idea what a good, fairly negotiated, arm's length market rate would be, and we're
this was
relying
our-
on
yeah.
80,000. Yeah, I realize,
Yeah.
but sometimes you throw them all out and start again, as you've
Yeah.
done, and sometimes you feel like you got
Yeah.
a fair result. So, I mean, is 80,000 at 3% fair? And then related to that, it seems like a very long-term lease,
Right.
which has, I
Well,
see the flip
obviously,
side.
yeah,
to it.
the long term is basically they would not make this investment if it was a short term lease. So that's what you're balancing is the length of the term versus what they put in. We were very pleased based on what other responses we got, as well as what we're getting today with this kind of return. But we'll get back to you
If
on
you
all
could get
those
back
questions.
to Jonathan, because
Yeah.
it will be considered it's not being voted on here. It will be voted on at the Finance Committee this afternoon.
Yeah.
So if you could get back to Jonathan with those
Before
answers
that.
before then, that
Yeah,
would be
I'd
very
like to-
helpful.
Yeah.
That would
be
be
able
very
to
helpful.
cast an informed
Yeah.
vote. So.
Yep.
Thanks.
Very good. Okay, we have one action item for Metro North.
Yes.
Page 123.
Yeah, this is the approval of an agreement with us and NISDOT. This is a supplemental agreement. We're asking board approval so we can enter into an agreement for $5.678 million to replace the overhead bridge in the town of Poughkeepsie.
Move it. Are there any questions on this item? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Procurements, Long Island Railroad, page 130.
Okay, there are 5 Long Island Railroad procurements in this month's package totaling $3.6 million. There are 2 non-competitive
And
procurements.
there is a amended in front of you for one of the procurements for the New York State Industry for the Blind, Disabled, I'm sorry. It changed the page, please. Go ahead.
And it showed a correction to the contract term.
Right.
So we have these 2 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $1.2 million. The first is a sole source procurement to Knox Kershaw. It covers both Long Island Railroad and Metro North, and it is for specialty parts on track equipment. The second one is the New York State Industries for Disabled. It's a fixed price amount of $461,000 for data entry and data conversion services. You'll note on the staff summary on page 132 that these services are provided by the New York State Office of Disabled based on their status as a preferred source. And they are within, the fair market value by 15%, so we award to them. Any questions?
Any questions on either of those 2 items? Chuck?
I have a concern which goes across the board, and you've seen it and heard it before, which is to encourage competition. I question whether publication in the New York State Contractor Reporter and the New York Post, a publication I have a personal affinity for, having served as a director of that company, is sufficient notice to attract all of the possible bidders. I would ask you in the future, going forward, to consider a system in and by which you affirmatively solicit bids, whether they be in terms of publication, whether they be in terms of the internet, whether they be in terms of writing to the people in the field and saying, we are going to open this up, we'd like to solicit your bid. I'd like to suggest we do that as a matter of course going forward. And to the extent you do it now, bravo. But I suspect, based on these reports, that it's limited pretty much to the New York Post and the Contract Reporter.
I will have a discussion. I think Howard and I will need to discuss with, council and with Anthony Bombase and Dennis our ability to affirmatively solicit. But we will come back to you on that.
If there is a legal impediment, I think you ought to focus on that immediately so that the legislature can cure that. We are spending tens of billions of dollars in overall expenditures over a period of time. And the only way we can effectively be assured that we're getting the best value for our dollar is to ensure that there's active competition. I don't see it. I don't see it here in these bids, except with one exception, the United Cesspool Service. But I don't see it in many of the others in these books. And I think we have got to do everything we can to stimulate it.
So we will get back to you on that one. And we would ask for a vote.
Any other questions on these two items? Jim, first.
I would just mention the Knox-Kershaw most favored nation clause. I think that's a real plus, and I'm very happy to see that as protecting us.
Thank you.
Jim?
In regards to Chuck's request, when you do that study, I think we have to look at that whole area and also look at the economics of expanding and going out into the public to find more. It's certainly going to cost us more dollars, and maybe that will not be something to hold us back, but we should look at the fact that if we're going to expand this, what the cost is going to be to the agencies to expand.
Okay.
Jonathan?
I agree with my two colleagues on that, but I'll keep my comments brief and my question limited. I'm curious, do we do any diligence to check the certification that the prices quoted are not greater than charged to most favored customers, or do we just accept the word of the applicant?
No, as part of our due diligence, we do go through and look at what are the most favored nation quotes.
I'm sorry, I didn't find. Do we look at what?
We look at, what are the quotation of prices for most favored nation.
So we look at other agencies and do a comparison to see whether it's true?
Right.
Or?
It's part of their obligation to provide us with the information.
As an attachment to the certificate? Is that how it works?
I'm not sure whether it's an attachment, but I know that there's a due diligence effort.
That it's done.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on these two items? If not, the motion has been made second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have three competitive procurements. Starting on page 133.
And these were all competitive solicitations for rubbish removal. We have Cummins Allison Corporation and Cesspool Services, and we ask for a vote on those contracts.
Second? Any question on any of these three items? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. There are no, there's one competitive procurement for Metro North.
Yes.
Page 135.
Right. We have one procurement. This is a major interagency procurement for the maintenance of the non-revenue fleet for a number of agencies in the MTA. This is, just we could put this in context for 1 minute. As you know, over the past year or two, there's been an ongoing effort to reduce non-revenue vehicle fleet across all the MTA agencies. Ultimately, there have been reductions made at the different agencies, and a task force was set up led by Jim Ferrara at B&T, looking at other ways to save money now that we had right-sized the fleets. And so the critical thing that was looked at was the maintenance contracts, how we maintain the fleet. This is the biggest amount of money in terms of going forward. Metro North led an interagency procurement. It involved New York City Paratransit, Long Island Railroad, Metro North. The terms do apply to New York City bus and subways if they so desire, or B&T. And basically, we went out in a competitive way to determine who should help manage this process for us. This was an RFP. It was structured looking at both service qualifications and cost. The selection committee consisted of people from all the different agencies. It was a unanimous selection to go with Automotive Resources International. They had a couple of things that were the reasons why. One is their fee was the lowest, their ongoing fee. Secondly, and as importantly, is that the information that they are going to provide to us will best allow the agencies to manage the repairs to the fleet. And that's actually the bigger number in this $34 million. Most of that is payments to other parties to repair the fleet. So we have estimated that, well, we know we're getting a 15% reduction compared to today on the fixed fee portion. We believe if we get a 2% savings on overall repair costs, which should be a small number, due to better information and how we're managing this, that would give us an additional savings. Overall, the estimated cost of the contract is $34,080,000, and we ask the board's approval of that contract.
Is there a motion to approve? Second? Questions? Chuck?
Same question as before. Was there any solicitation of bidders here over and above the request for expressions of interest? How were they published? How did you go out and solicit them?
Anthony, can you...
Absolutely. This was a very, very long process.
They can't hear, Anthony.
This was a very, very long process.
He doesn't have one.
Of advertising for this particular service. We did what
It's cost cutting.
all agency procurement guidelines. What you see is contract review, newspaper publication, our website. We also had an initial request for expressions of interest. We sat down with prospective vendors before the actual RFP process. And once the RFP process was coordinated, we did direct solicitation to prospective vendors. So we did a combination of what is required per the guidelines, and additionally, outside of what is in the guidelines, to those direct outreach to other major publications. And we actually called prospective vendors into the offices to sit down with them.
Good. Thank you.
Next time we should use the microphone so that it not only is good for the people who are here, but the people watching the show on the website in that regard. Are there any other questions in regard to this item? Motion to approve has been made. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Capital construction procurements.
David. Capital Construction has 6 procurement items this month for approval, all of which are competitive, and total $15,391,941.50. The items begin on page 141. The first item is for the security program and requests approval for the upgrade of the Cisco video surveillance system. The item includes future options for additional support. The total is $827,725 for the base work and options. The options can be exercised by MTA headquarters upon completion of the base work. Items 2 and 6 all involve contracts for east side access. Item 2 is a modification for additional design work for the general engineering contract in the amount of $7,418,433. Items 3 and 4 are modifications to the Harrow Structures Part 2 contract for the construction of a foundation for a signal bridge and the furnishing and installation of temporary guy anchors. These mods total $1,391,226. Items 5 and 6 are for modifications to the Queensboard Tunnel contract for underpinning of the Harrow CIL structure related to the PNC tunnel drive that was discussed earlier, and reconciliation of the unit quantity for board tunnel excavation. These mods totals $5,754,557.50.
Is there a motion to approve?
I have a question.
Second. Questions? Jonathan.
Thank you. My questions have primarily to do with item number 2, and then the same question, I guess, for item 3 and 4. I guess a couple of questions. When you look at the percent of the modification to, the current amount, it's relatively small at 2.3%, but then when you look at the percent of modifications to the original amount, it's 132%, and I thought maybe you should or could comment on why certain things hadn't been originally anticipated and why the same contract continues to be modified and modified. And then I have a couple more questions.
I'm sorry. The original contract, when established, was really established at a very low number. Remember, this is we're talking about a contract that has a construction value of about $6 billion, and someone expected that to, in effect, be designed for $120,000. Not doable. It was in the type of contract that was kind of historically, when I looked at that, was not negotiated but dictated. So that's the type of contract that always will result in changes. Now, in addition to that, this contract has evolved continuously, primarily due to the various changes that occurred. And constantly there are redesigns, repackaging, things that are required to be done based on unknown situation as one moves along. And I'll be glad to actually give you a total expose on this one because it's really very complex and very long. The other part that you have not seen yet, but you will see, is the fact that our construction phase services also is rather low, and we'll be coming back to the board probably next month for a significant increase on the construction support services, again, under valued the beginning and just kind of inching along on.
Let me, on number two, just to help me,
This is the
because it
GC.
long predates me and I believe you.
Yeah, it
But
does a lot.
what year was the contract originally?
Oh, gosh. I think it's going back to 2004, I believe.
Well, but you understand the notion that a contract was so low at the outset and then modified so many times to a point where the original size is 1 1/3, been exceeded by 1 1/3, with the comment that you expect it to come back and back, troubles me, because I question whether the original contract was of sufficient scope, and we can't go back to 04, but that the genesis of my question, and I take you up on your offer. I won't do it now because it's punishing and unfair.
I'll be glad to do that. What I'll tell you right now, that when you look at the contract that is, let's say, just forget about the time it was valued at construction at $5 billion, and you place on it $120 million for a design. It's totally
it seems,
out of whack.
Right, it seems that way to me, but I don't know how it was allowed to happen. But look,
I would be glad to brief you on that.
All right, so in the interest of time, please contact me in it. But I just want to point out that one, just again, as we talk about the reports and the language, and I'll just do one that sticks out, and there are a number that I'll talk to the chairman about. But the paragraph that talks about how the consultant proposed $8.897 million for changes, while our estimate was 7 and change. Negotiations were held and the parties agreed to an amount which leads to a savings of. I mean, it's a savings in its one sense of the word, but it's still $7.5 million of an increase. So the language needs to be watched a little bit. That $7.5 million of an increase is not a savings.
It is a save. Yeah, it's one minus another actually. So.
Well, I don't know how it's substantial. It's no details given. I don't know how it's substantial.
Well, we normally don't give the details here. This is, trust me, it's a long negotiation with a lot of details. So. If you want, we'll just make sure they will brief you on that as well, specifically, so you understand how this is done. But it's a very long process.
It's still over $400,000 more than your original estimate. So savings or costs, the eye is in the beholder.
They go back and forth.
Okay. It's a back and forth.
I agree.
I got it.
We tend to the consultants come in high. We tend to come in low. This is, I don't want to refer to it as almost as like a Middle Eastern negotiation, but it is in many ways, but it's in many ways, you look at the amount of hours, the people that they're proposing, the overhead is set, so you don't deal with that. So you negotiate fees, so there are a lot of negotiations going on that eventually amount to what you see there. Sometimes they have too many hours, we cut the hours. Sometimes they prove that hours are needed, so we add hours. Then we look at the people that they're using, the rates that are. So it is really a very long process. What you see here is a result of probably several months of negotiation.
Okay, thanks. In the interest of time,
If you
I'll
could give
sus-
Jonathan some background on the whole contract, that would be very
I
helpful.
will do just that.
And
I
then-
will set
and
up a time for
Please,
us to get
I'll
together.
contact me.
No
In
problem.
the interest of time, I won't ask the questions on 3 and 4. They're similar, and we can talk about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Charles, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, out of an overabundance of caution, recuse on items 3 and 4.
Okay, somebody has that. Commissioners are recusing on items 3 and 4. Okay. Any other questions on these items? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have one ratification.
Yes, Capital Construction has one ratification item this month. The item is requesting that the board ratify the award of a public work contract for the furnishing and installation of an ActiveView video wall and associated electrical enhancements for the security program in the amount of $1,531,403.
Motion to approve. Second. Any questions on this item? All in favor? Aye. Okay, with that, I think we have come to the conclusion of the meeting. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me just make sure that.